delaying anymore, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Comes from the Australian Signals Directorate, organisation as a journalist I've had much to do with over a long period of time, and they've become really every year more central to Australia's security and cyber security as we get further into this IT and AI age. Unfortunately, as we arm ourselves with AI, so do the cybercriminals, which adds another level of concern and response. So I'd like to introduce Stephanie Crowe, the head of Australian Cyber Security Centre at the Australian Signals Directorate. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Chris, for that lovely welcome. And before I start, I too would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Ngunnawal people, and I would like to pay my respect to their elders past and present, and also extend that welcome to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. And a sincere thank you to Tech In Gov for inviting me along today to talk about something that's really important, not only to me as the head of the Australian Cyber Security Centre, but actually every one of my staff members working at ASD in the cyber security mission, which is the importance of our public and private sector partnerships. And I think, Chris, your introduction was really good and aligned with sort of what I'm going to talk about, which is the value of those partnerships and why they're so critical, even more so than they have been perhaps in the past. So I guess I wanted to tell you that everyone at the Australian Signals Directorate, we pretty much in the cybersecurity mission think day and night, strategise about how we're going to work with industry and work with some of the most challenging threat landscapes and capabilities that we're dealing with at the moment in the modern digital age. And actually, for those of you who don't know much about the Australian Signals Directorate, we have a really, really long history of protecting our national interests, and we do that through our two main missions, which is the collection of foreign signals intelligence and also the cybersecurity service that we do. But we've been doing the cybersecurity service, make no doubt, for the last 80 years. So yes, we've been doing it before computers, we've been doing it before the internet, and actually since World War II, when our predecessor agency, the Central Bureau, was working to the same mission statement that we say publicly, which is reveal our secrets and protect our own. So back then, we were responsible, of course, for collecting enemy military intelligence, decoding that, and providing that to the Allies in support of the war effort in the Pacific. But our other important function during that time was the protection of our own military communications and making sure that they were transited securely without compromise. And that has evolved into the mission that we have today in cybersecurity, to use it as a modern term. It's very much about the protection and security and integrity of our information that's critical to our country's security. So you may have heard us say a couple of things publicly. The first one is that we're in the most complex threat environment since World War II. And the other one that we often routinely say in public is cybersecurity is a team sport. And I think there are really two main reasons why we say those things publicly over and over again, or a multiple number of reasons. But to me, it is really, really clear saying those two things, that the Australian Signals Directorate can't do this alone. No agency can protect all the systems in this country on our own, and we need really robust partnerships to be able to do that. It is frankly too vast out there, too sophisticated, and it's too interconnected. There is no way that ASD on its own can do what we do today. So there's a couple of things I'll talk to that explain why that's the case. The first one is simply about the hackers out there. So we have state-sponsored actors and we have cyber criminals that are persistently targeting all of our Australian systems, governments, critical infrastructure and businesses for espionage, and information gathering, and they're doing this every single day. These adversaries are leveraging advanced technologies now, and they're evolving their tradecraft to exploit vulnerabilities and, as we've seen in some of our allied countries in the United States, pre-positioning on networks for the purposes of disruption. That's a very different dynamic to what we've been used to in the past. And so in this context, it is really important to think about how we work with industry to mitigate and defend against those types of threats. Those of you who would have seen our annual cyber threat report that we put out last year for the previous financial year, so that's 23 to 24, I'll just throw out a couple of stats there just to explain the evolving threat environment that we see today. On average, we get around 100 calls a day to ASD from the community or industry or government reporting cybersecurity incidents. We had around 87,000 reports of cybercrime to ASD alone, the equivalent of one report every 6 minutes. We had an increase of publicly reported vulnerabilities by 31% compared to the year prior. And out of those public vulnerabilities, 21% of those were able to be exploited by cybercriminals within 48 hours of their release publicly. The average loss of reported cybercrime for small businesses increased to around $500,000 for each entity that year as well. So you can see just how drastic we are seeing this threat environment escalate, worsen, become more volatile, and you can see why I sort of maybe lie awake at night thinking about how we work together more to bring these numbers down. The cybercriminal environment has quite rapidly evolved, and my time in the cybersecurity mission, around about 11 years, it's really evolved quite differently to how we handled it 11 years ago at ASD. About 10 years ago, ransomware was very effective at generating significant profit for cybercriminals. They would deploy malicious software, stop networks from operating, and demand a ransom. It does remain, unfortunately, the most destructive type of cybercrime we do have in Australia. But over time, as we collectively got better at having backups across the country, we did see, unfortunately, the more frequent emergence of data theft and extortion activities. So this probably isn't the most destructive type of cybercrime, but it can be the most reputationally damaging for both the victim and the customers that they serve. And cybercriminals, they actually know this. That's why they've evolved and adapted to move away from traditional encrypting of networks into the data theft and extortion space, because they know that if they threaten a company's reputation, they're more likely to get payment for their ransom. We are now seeing today actually credential theft emerging as one of the most significant challenges that we're dealing with in the cybersecurity space. And in the last threat report, we talked about the fact that over 30% of the incidents that we responded to on a daily basis were actually the result of someone's username and password being stolen by a cybercriminal or a state actor and then used to log in legitimately to a network or used to compromise devices. And in fact, 41% of data breaches involved exploiting or using usernames and passwords. So cybercriminals have been able to achieve their mass collection of usernames and passwords actually through the deployment of malware that is called information stealer malware. And this malware, if you want to read more about it, it's on cyber.gov.au. We have some advisories out there to help entities understand what this malware does. But it's designed to specifically sit on a device unnoticeable to the victim for the sole purposes of collecting usernames and passwords. And the cybercriminals will do one of two things by collecting those credentials. They'll either use it themselves to then compromise user accounts, corporate networks, any email addresses that they can, or email accounts, or actually what is also a market these days is packaging all those credentials up, all those usernames and passwords, and putting them on the dark web and selling them to other cybercriminals. So there is a really big market out there for this type of activity. So that's all about the hackers that we're dealing with. We're also dealing with ... the internet. So just to explain what I mean by that, I said that we're now more digitized than ever, but actually if you think about the World Wide Web and you think about how ubiquitous it is in our daily lives, along with the likes of smartphones and devices, there are actually a lot of people that don't realise they are using the internet on a daily basis for parts of their activities every day. And some of us actually don't realise we're doing it because it's that ingrained into how we operate as a society. And the World Wide Web has been a great source of information for all of us, communication and total convenience, which is great. But actually, the World Wide Web and the network of computers it's built upon, which is called the internet, was actually not built with any security in mind when it was invented. And the internet today is not by any means used what it was intended for. Actually, the internet was, it has roots to the Cold War in the 1960s, when the US Department of Defense funded the creation of the communications network that would be able to be conducted via computers and that could survive a nuclear attack. It was not designed for public communications or social media or any of the things that we use today. And if you look at the emergence of technologies over time, actually the internet has grown faster than any other emerging technology that we've dealt with in the past. Let's exclude AI for now as part of this conversation. Just to give you some facts here, to reach 50 million users, radio took 38 years to do that. Television took 13 years to reach 50 million users. The internet only took 4 years to reach 50 million users. And so because it's not built with security in mind, you can imagine that rapid expansion so quickly, it's come with it a raft of risks, threats, and vulnerabilities that we're now building new technologies on. The sheer volume of traffic and the more integrated nature of what the internet today is doing has also created all of these significant vulnerabilities we're dealing with. Internet of Things devices, it's a classic example of how we've rapidly digitized and expanded the way we operate without having security in mind when we do that. So if you think about all of those smart fridges, smart televisions, smart devices, baby monitors, all out there in the community, all of those things have been introduced on top of basically a system that's already inherent with vulnerabilities. So that's the internet. And now let's think about the emerging technologies. I actually wouldn't say AI is emerging anymore, but it is part of one of the biggest considerations we have to make now that we're facing the emergence of things like artificial intelligence, and perhaps even more so, I wonder how rapid it's going to expand compared to the internet. I probably think it might beat it. The other one is quantum computing, which I'll get to in a minute. But cybercriminals are actually leveraging AI already. They're doing it right now to enhance their capabilities and scale their operations. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't you use a large language model to write you a spear phishing email that's really convincing? You'll have more success that way. It just makes perfect sense. There are now large-scale open source model repositories which make artificial intelligence and machine learning models trivially accessible to the public. And they were not 5 to 6 years ago. And they were not long ago prohibitively expensive for individuals to develop and train. But now anyone can access these, and so can the cybercriminals. They have a whole bunch of risks with them, of course, artificial intelligence. They can be poisoned, they can be influenced by user inputs, and they can be a source of mis and disinformation. Cyber actors could use them to write malicious code. They could automate their activities, and they could essentially triple or double what they're doing to us now over time. Probably not that long. But AI, make no mistake, will give us opportunities as well. And they will give us opportunities, particularly for our network defenders, to more quickly patch vulnerabilities. They will potentially make us quicker to detect malicious activity than we have been able to in the past. And they'll probably give us more efficiency in our data analysis, which is really, really important. And so for those reasons, I just want to say that we shouldn't be afraid of AI, but we need to walk into this thinking about how we deploy it and use it securely, unlike the approach we took to the internet. And then there's quantum. It's not scary at all. Cryptographically relevant quantum computers. It is a mouthful, but it's a really important thing to understand. The emergence of a computer that can, of an emergence of a quantum computer, it will actually make the public key cryptography and our encryption standards that we use today insecure. So think of all those padlocks. Every time you go on the internet, you go to a secure website like your banking site, it has a little padlock on it. All of the encryption protocols used to secure that, if there's a quantum computer that can exploit those algorithms, will make that insecure. So it's a bit terrifying when you think about it. But the way quantum computers operate, they are very different and more powerful than the computers we have today. Think about it, basically that they will simply be a computer that does better maths, more quicker and faster. So they're going to be able to produce more output, more capacity and more possibilities. Current public cryptography has been in existence since the 1980s. So when you think about we're heading into 2030, that's a very long time to be using some of the same crypt that we've been using since the 80s. And all of it needs to be replaced for it to be secure against a crypt attack using a quantum computer. So my organisation, ASD, we put out some public messaging on this, and our assessment is that we all need to be ready for this, maybe around 2030. But in thinking about the work that it will take to replace all of these algorithms, that's a really big body of work and not much time. So it is at a minimum very daunting. And frankly, we need the help, all help of industry and all help of government to get after some of these emerging and future problems. So I want to talk a bit about now at ASD how we strategise working with industry, and there's a couple of ways in which we do that. We view all of our engagement with industry as critical for working on some of the current cybersecurity threats, but also the emerging ones, mainly because the private sector are actually the ones that hold vast stores of data, but they also are the ones that operate the networks, the critical infrastructure, and they are also the ones that design and deliver new technologies in our environment. This makes them a very attractive target of malicious cyber actors, so we absolutely have to work with them to protect them. But we also have to work with them to think about what standards we want to set for our technology and how we want to secure them from the deployment and get-go. So there's a couple of ways that we work with industry to do this. The first one is by making sure that we are sharing information and we are sharing our learnings and making sure the partnership with the industry is a two-way street, not one way. So this is one of the most effective ways that we found to strengthen some of our national cyber defences, because at ASD we identify a lot of malicious activity, but if we don't share that and put it out in the industry, we won't know whether that activity is actually happening or whether we can actually alert other victims across Australia before it happens. So sharing intelligence and some of the security information we have, as well as indicators of compromise, has actually helped ASD block some of that malicious activity getting to Australians. And we've actually been able to notify entities of potential cybercrime incidents before they've happened. In the financial year 23-24, we did over 930 notifications to entities advising them that they might have had a problem. And in some of those notifications, we actually prevented ransomware incidents from happening, which is a huge outcome. And all of that is only possible because of the close relationships we have with the industry and the constant sharing of information that we do. And our cyber threat intelligence sharing platform, CETIS, for anyone who's subscribed to that, it's one of those services that allows us to do that with near machine speed and sharing timely. The other thing that we prioritise in our relationship is a shared sense of preparedness. And this is really important based on everything that I've just told you about the threat environment. We need partnerships that focus on practice, that focus on cooperation and preparing for the future. For quantum preparedness, we have time but not much. And we've been focused on working with industry and organisations to start preparing now, identifying those systems that need to have quantum-resistant crypt and implementing a pathway to change. We've updated our information security manual with cryptographically improved algorithms to help get us on this journey. But the risk of quantum computing can only be mitigated if we have that help of industry through the implementation path. Conducting joint exercises and simulations is another critical part of preparedness. And these activities allow us not only to test our response capabilities, but actually they help us identify gaps and improve our coordination with each other. And by simulating real-world cyber attacks, we can ensure that both public and private sector organisations can respond effectively when there's an incident. And that's really, really important, because if there is a significant incident in this country, it needs to be a national response, all working together to help respond and recover. And it's now more important these days to make sure we've got equal investment across prevention and preparedness, not just one. The other thing we focus on is working with industry on investment in modern technologies. It's really essential for staying ahead of these cyber threats, and it includes implementing for big network owners some of the advice we put out in our publication on modern defensible architecture. So thinking about new concepts like secure by design and concepts like zero trust, and thinking about that in the way we build networks now into the future is going to be really important. But we actually need industry to help us secure individuals at scale. So For example, lots of individuals can take steps to prevent the theft of their usernames and passwords that I mentioned before. You can have really good hygiene, reset your passwords regularly. You can make sure you're not using your online shopping account password that's the same as your corporate account, and you can do all of those things. But actually, we need industry helping us with the implementation of modern technologies like multi-factor authentication, like passkeys. And we need that so that we can protect entities at a much greater scale than just relying on an individual response. Password managers are also a really good thing that we need to promote and get people using too. With artificial intelligence, actually secure deployment will be really critical, and artificial intelligence will only be as secure as the IT environment or the platform that it's sitting on. So it's really important that we make sure that we are securing the foundational parts of our networks before we think about some of these new technologies coming out onto our systems. But imagine what we could do if we did this securely. Could we actually reduce that patching window from 48 hours and actually make it super hard for cybercriminals to exploit us because we're rapidly patching in a really short time frame? That's the goal here. Actually using some of these technologies to help us be quicker at the response part too. There's also work to do in policy and regulation. We need partnerships to assist with developing robust policy and regulatory frameworks. And some of the great work we did with industry over the past couple of years led to good outcomes in the passing of the Cybersecurity Act last year, which put an obligation on ASD to protect the information that industry shares with us when they report it to us. And that's for a number of reasons. It's actually about having good faith and confidentiality arrangements legislated and cemented in the way that we do our partnerships, but it's actually around supporting industry to let them be able to do what they need to do when an incident happens. And it's about protecting that information while we're at the triaging component and stopping the bleeding of an incident. It's really important. And the cyber legislation actually is going to produce some really good outcomes for those Internet of Things devices. For the first time, we're going to see some standards developed that will hopefully stop some of these devices being on the internet using default passwords or easy password 123 kind of situations, which is really beneficial for cyber criminals. But we need those devices secure before they're installed on people's Wi-Fi networks and home accounts. The other thing that we work really hard on is building trust and cooperation. That's a core principle of how we work with industry. It's the foundation of our success. And actually it requires open communication, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to protecting our national interests. So out of the commercial space into a partnerships that is about protecting Australians. Our partnership program, the ASD Cybersecurity Partner Program, is available and helps industry better understand the threats, and it also equips businesses to fight back. And when we discover malicious code or tradecraft, the first thing we do is think about how do we get this out to our industry partners so that they can defend themselves. And it's free to join. If anyone would like to join, cyber.gov.au, please do so. We're at over 119,000 partners now, and we want more. So please, if I can get you to take one message away today, join the partnership program, that would be great. So I'll sum up now and just give you some sort of closing thoughts. So at ASD, our culture and very much a way of how we operate is priding ourselves on being able to face cyber threats and emerging tech in the same way that we've done in the past. And just to quote a former Director General of ASD, we always strive to do this with the same innovation, imagination and creativity we have always dealt with this challenge. And we've been really lucky to be doing this lockstep with our Five Eyes buddies for the past 80 years. But what we need more today, and that we've ever needed, is our industry buddies in that partnership too. So we cannot and will not be able to operate without industry, and I encourage all those today working with industry, please think about how you have that more strategic partnership and think about the objectives in mind when we do that. When working with industry and government, we need to think about how we leverage the best of both worlds, who is building and testing the tech, and the capability to implement standards. And we need to partner together and make mistakes together. That's really important. We need to make mistakes and share the lessons that we learned. In cybersecurity, I can tell you how important and critical that is, because in my experience, a network defender always has that pressure on them of feeling like they have to be right all the time. There can be no hole in the network, there can be no vulnerability, no weakness, because a cyber hacker only has to be right once. And that's the real, I guess, that's really reflective of the challenge that we're up against today. And it is my view that only with true partnership with industry will we have any chance at being able to be right all the time, and that's the objective. So thank you all for listening to what I had to say today and for having me here at this conference. There are ASD, some of my ASD staff who will be on some of the panels throughout this conference, and I encourage you to attend their sessions, but also ask them the really hard questions because they're prepared for that. Sorry to all my staff out there who are now nervous, but they're here to help you. Thank you very much.